Why does BCCI ban their Indian players from playing in other franchise tournament is a question I've always asked. It was the 2010 Big Bash League when Dr. Harry Harinath, the former director of Cricket Australia, went to BCCI and asked BCCI to release the Indian players to hopefully come to Australia and play the Big Bash League of that season. In fact, things had gone on to such extent that Dr. Harinath, who was the former chairman of New South Wales, had gone to Rohit Sharma and even asked him to come to play for the Sydney Thunders. He even went on to say on record that if you recruit 2 Indians and 2 Sri Lankans in the Sydney Thunders, it will go a long way, not just for the team but for the league itself. And that's when the founders of the IPL went to the BCCI and said, hey, we have to make sure that the Indian players do not play any franchise tournament that's not the IPL, which simply means they cannot play any franchise tournament that's not held by India. Now, when you take a step back and think about this, it's such a radical move. It's such an extreme to go to ensure something is being protected. And that's what we are first going to head into. We are first going to talk about why BCCI does this to begin with and then change it around and look at it from the player's perspective. The first reason, and this is ironic in itself, look at the Big Bash, look at the Caribbean Premier League, look at the 100, look at the SA T20, look at all of these T20 leagues, and they have one thing in common, and it's the fact that they don't have any Indian player playing in them. And that's the uniqueness IPL holds. And that's what the BCCI is trying to do. It's trying to protect the IPL's commercials and its USP. Both of them happen to be Indian players, the Indian star players, which is also what preserves the dominance of the tournament in itself, knowing that BCCI is the biggest board out there, knowing that the Indian cricketers in the cricketing world are the biggest of stars. So if you have them in one tournament, they automatically become the biggest, which also coincides with the second reason. Now, if you have this USP with you, and if you suddenly give it to the rest of the world, you're losing out on the USP. But more than that, you're also ensuring that other T20 leagues can now start competing with you. But this reason has a deeper root to think about, and that is something Rahul Dravid, the former Indian coach, brought about a couple of years ago. And that is the Indian players choosing to play franchise T20 tournaments around the world over domestic matches that happen in India. Because let's take the example of the 2025 season when the Ranji Trophy started in October and got over in February of 2026. In between all of this, you also had the Syed Mushtaq Ali start in November and in December, and then the Vijay Hazare that started in December and got over in January. And parallelly, you had the Big Bash and the SAT20 start in December, and the Indian domestic season hadn't even come to an end yet. And that is the biggest concern Rahul Dravid had, that between all of these domestic seasons and domestic matches that the Indian players will have to play, what if they choose the franchise T20 tournaments around the world and miss out on the Vijay Hazare tournament, which is a 50 over format? But more importantly, what if they miss out on the Ranji Trophy matches, which is the red ball format? And of course, you can always argue that the 100 is going on right now and there are no domestic matches going on right now. But if you're allowing the Indian players to play one franchise tournament, then you would have to allow them to play all of them. Now, if that's understood, something also to think about is if players are doing that around the world, managing the workload becomes very, very difficult. Because think about this, since 2025 until now, Shubman Gill has played 76 matches in total, 45 of them being international matches and 31 of them just playing the IPL. But right, Shubman Gill is an exception because he is the Test captain and the ODI captain, and in between he also played a couple of T20Is for the Indian team. So let's look at someone like a Jasprit Bumrah, who for the longest time didn't even play an ODI match. He's played 60 matches in total, 35 of them being international and 25 of them being the IPL. But you could even argue that Jasprit Bumrah is a multi-format player. So let's just look at Abhishek Sharma, who only plays the T20 format. He himself has played 73 matches in the last year and a half, 44 of them for the Indian team and 29 in the IPL. The point being that all of these players play a lot of matches regardless of the IPL or not. And when you include the IPL, and of course they will play the IPL, their workload is anyways very high. And now if you allow these players to go abroad and play the franchise tournament, not only does it become very, very difficult to control the workload management of these players in the franchise teams, but it also becomes very, very difficult to understand the availability of all these players because of more injuries that can occur. Alright lads, we have 4 minutes into the video and you still haven't hit that
that subscribe button. Get us to 40,000 subscribers so that by the end of the year, we can reach 100,000.
And the last reason has nothing necessarily to do with the players or the teams, but just the history of how BCCI has handled things. Like I said, in 2010, BCCI didn't allow Rohit Sharma or any of the Indian players to go play the Big Bash League. But it wasn't just in 2010, because even in 2011, the inaugural season of the Sri Lankan Premier League had to be postponed because BCCI in the end didn't allow the Indian players to go play the Sri Lankan Premier League, because of which the entire Premier League had to be postponed by a year. Funnily enough, this was also because the BCCI had feared that the Premier League was bankrolled by Lalit Modi, which in itself is a different conversation. And fast forward 10 years, around 2021, Yuvraj Singh wanted to come back to play for Punjab, the state side, to hopefully find himself playing in the IPL once again. A World Cup winner who was also the man of the tournament, BCCI didn't allow him to do that because Yuvraj Singh was allowed by the BCCI to play in the Canada T20 League. Now, if a retired player is allowed to do this, BCCI feared that a lot of retired players might just do this, which is also why they didn't want to set that as a standard. And imagine this, a year down the line, MS Dhoni was rumored, by the way, just rumored, that he might possibly be a mentor for Joburg Super Kings, a team that the Super King franchisee bought in the SAT20 League. Even before this could be a fact, BCCI came out to say that Dhoni won't be allowed to do this because he's still an active cricketer, still playing the IPL, which is basically not allowed. And in 2026, the BCCI's Apex Council did have a conversation, which is still not confirmed as of yet, where players who have retired and played foreign franchise tournament will have a 5-year cooling off period before they can participate in Indian cricket in any form. Now, when you look at these reasons, it might make sense for some of y'all, if not most of y'all. BCCI is doing what's best for their business. BCCI is doing everything to make sure IPL is the best franchise tournament around the world, and so many years down the line, it still is. But now when you look at it from the player's perspective, do let me know in the comments down below if your mind does change. The first and the main reason for why players should be allowed is because not only do they get more exposure of conditions that are not Indian conditions, they also get exposed to different game circumstances. Because for example, now players will experience different conditions, different climates, different team and coaching strategies and environments, and also be exposed to different kind of players within their team. Take the example of someone like a Mayank Yadav who has gone through the system and now has started playing for the Indian team. For someone like him who got his recognition in the IPL, unless he's selected in the India A tours to England or Ireland or South Africa or any of the SENA countries, the only time he will be exposed to any of these conditions is when he plays for the Indian team, and that is if he even makes it. Mayank Yadav is one such lucky player to be able to make it in the white ball formats, because of course you have regular tours in the red ball format, but if you're white ball specialists, the only time they're playing in foreign conditions is when they play for the Indian team, if they make it. But take the example of someone like a Harry Brook who played the IPL in 2023 and then played for England in India 2 years later. But of course, different formats, and didn't particularly perform well in either of those series. But it's the fact that he was able to come to India to play a high level tournament, which means he was able to adapt to the conditions or at least get used to them. It becomes even more important now because when you look at the private state T20 leagues and the IPL, the pitches are only getting flatter and flatter, and it's only getting easier for the batters to score runs. The second you put them in Australia, England or Ireland, you will only be found out the way the Indian batters were found out in Ireland and England when we were whitewashed across those two series. Of course, it didn't matter a couple of years ago, and of course we have also won 2 back-to-back T20 World Cups, but you have to keep in mind one was in the US and the West Indies and the second was in India. Conditions that are very, very similar and suitable for the Indian batters. If these batters and bowlers want to be able to adapt to foreign conditions, they also need to be able to get the opportunity to play in foreign leagues to be able to adapt when they represent the Indian team. Now, the second reason is something to really think about, and that is players just simply miss out on professional opportunities. Take the example of Suryakumar Yadav. Now, he's been dropped from the Indian team. Imagine for whatever reason he doesn't get picked in the IPL next year. Unfortunately, because he's not retired yet, he cannot go around the world playing franchise T20 tournaments when he's the specialist in that format. mat. And he cannot buy his way into the IPL, showing that he's performed around the world. What he will unfortunately have to do is play the state tournament, play the Mumbai League, and hopefully scores and performs there to then be picked in the IPL. Now, this is a very ideal example because Suryakumar Yadav, not only has he played for the Indian team, he has captained the Indian team and won the World Cup. Think about a player who has played a couple of matches for the Indian team, has played a couple of matches in the IPL, but unfortunately hasn't found himself have a breakthrough season as of yet. He once again has to go through the domestic structure rather than go around the world and explore cricket and then come back and hopefully find himself play the IPL once again. The third reason is an interesting one. It's the fact that the current policy in Indian cricket is different for men and women, and it shouldn't happen that way. The women Indian cricketers, contracted or not contracted, can play the WBBL, can play the 100 or any other franchise tournaments around the world. Take the example of Shriyanka Patil. Not a lot of games happening in the Indian domestic circuit, but the Indian team were playing matches. And for Shriyanka Patil to make her way back into the Indian team, she ensured by the time she recovered from the injury, she played the Caribbean Premier League, played a lot of matches there, came back to India, played the domestic circuit, and a year down the line found herself playing for the Indian team once again. And the last two reasons are basically the same. The Indian players going abroad and playing global leagues will only increase the popularity of the sport. If the head of Olympic wants cricket in the Olympics because of a player like Virat Kohli, and because they want subcontinent population watching the Olympics, even if cricket's the excuse, imagine what these players would be able to do if they went globally, if they went to tournaments around the world and had stadiums fill up because of these few players. You would only increase the popularity of the sport. But we have talked about this in the last couple of weeks. BCCI doesn't necessarily care for popularizing the sport in itself. What it does care about is making sure it has a lot of money for itself. If you've enjoyed this video, like, share and subscribe, all that good stuff. All of our links are in the description below. Let us know what you think and if Indian players should be allowed to go or not to play in franchise tournaments around the world. Thank you so much for watching. Peace.